So, what a weekend for college football fans. Exciting spring games happening all across the nation. So much for us to discuss, and I can't wait to jump into it all and discuss these spring games tomorrow, 5 o'clock Central Standard Time on the live stream. Would love to see you there. We're going to be having some special guests so that we can dive into multiple teams' spring games, and it's just going to be a ton of fun. But today, we need to turn our attention to a team that did not have a spring game this weekend, but had a scrimmage this weekend, and then started off today with a big time commitment. And of course, we're talking about the Alabama Crimson Tide picking up a major target on the recruiting trail, and then Nick Saban being very pleased with his team, something we've got to break down. But before we can, as always, you all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Are you excited to hear how excited Nick Saban is with the team thus far? And let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. Those interactions seem small, but they are massive to content creators such as myself, and we are on a push to 20,000 subscribers. I'd love to have you a part of this unbelievable community. But having said all that, let's jump right into this, and let's start with Alabama's win on the recruiting trail they got this morning for four-star wide receiver Rico Scott, who comes in as the number 385 player in the nation per 24/7 Sports, the number 55 wide receiver, and the number 11 player in Pennsylvania. He also stands 6 foot, 185 pounds, and this is a guy that can flat out do it all. When you turn on the film, there's a lot I like. First off, he has got elusiveness and speed. When he gets the ball in his hands, he's a threat to score no matter where he has it. And secondly, the way they used him in this offense, he wasn't just put out on the outside and forgotten about, right? That was not at all the case. This was a guy they moved all around the field, from the outside to the inside, put him in motion, got him jet sweeps. This was an athlete for their team. This was a guy they knew was a catalyst for the offense. And anytime you're watching a commitment, an individual that commits to your school, and that's what you see, you need to be very excited because he was very important to his high school offense. And when you look at all of the little things he did at such an elite level, you need to already have an understanding this is a guy that's versatility can help any room in the nation. And I personally think he's going to be a riser during the course of this season. I think he's going to probably finish inside the top 300 prospects, and there's two primary reasons why. First and foremost, the production he had as a junior, where he had a massive increase in production from his sophomore year to his junior year. And he was already very productive his sophomore year. His sophomore highlights are very impressive, as I said, flexing the versatility he brings to the table. But his junior year, my goodness me, went over 1,100 yards and over 18 touchdowns on 66 receptions. And the other reason why I think he's going to have an increase in where his rank is because when you look at his offer list, pretty much every major institution in the nation is after this kid. He has got big time offers. I think we're looking at a guy that's going to land squarely in the top 300 prospects, and I'm really excited to see it. But this gives Alabama commitment number 5 in the class, a class that ranks currently as the number 17 class in the nation. And fear not, Alabama fans, though I don't believe any of you are afraid, or if you're someone who's not an Alabama fan and you're just checking this out to kind of get the scoop on what Alabama is doing during these scrimmages, fear not. A few seasons ago, Alabama was ranked 55th in the nation in May in recruiting, ended up with the number 2 recruiting class in the nation. It is not uncommon for Alabama to start a little bit slow during this time because they like to build those relationships. And that's why you see over the summer, as the season gets closer, the commitments start really ramping up. And I think we're just going to see that exact same thing once again. But now let's transition. Let's talk about what Nick Saban said when he discussed the second scrimmage, because Alabama's spring game is right around the corner, and I know all of you are very excited because I can't wait, and especially when we really break down what it is Nick Saban's been talking about. First and foremost, we have to start with a true freshman on the offensive side of the ball, because we've talked about some of the true freshmen on the defensive side of the ball that I think are going to be impact players, and we're going to revisit that conversation after spring, no doubt about it. But we have not addressed guys on the offensive side of the ball, and there's a name that I've kept hearing time and time again. We talked about him lightly on the live stream last week, but Justice Haynes continues to impress. And one thing that I picked up is when Nick Saban was talking about Justice Haynes, he pretty much listed every attribute a running back could do well and says, yeah, Justice Haynes does that at a very high level. You wouldn't think he was a freshman watching him play. Speed, vision, burst, power, quickness. Nick Saban was really praising Justice Haynes. And I think what gets me even more excited is when you realize, as talented as Justice Haynes is, this running back room as a whole has the ability to be very talented. You still have Jace McClellan, you still have Roydell Williams. Jamarian Miller apparently broke off like an 80-yard run on the scrimmage. Another guy who's been very impressive, looked really good against Kansas State in the bowl game. And Richard Young hasn't even stepped on campus yet. This running back room is a running back room that I have a lot of excitement for. I think it's a room that could be a really big piece to this Alabama offense, especially in a year where you're replacing a quarterback. Now, that being said, I have tremendous amount of faith in either quarterback they will trot out. But if you can have your offense rely on that power rush attack, I think it's just going to be even tougher to stop, and especially when we look at who the offensive coordinator is, Tommy Rees. And one of the things I consistently talk about whenever we mention Tommy Rees is if you go back and watch Notre Dame, you kind of start to get an understanding as to why people are excited about Tommy Rees. I understand. The Notre Dame offense left a lot to be desired, but when you watch, there's a lot of creativity. When you watch, it almost gets you excited for what the future could hold if you were to replace those Notre Dame uniforms with Alabama uniforms and give them those same athletes. I think this Tommy Rees offense is going to be a lot of fun. And hearing Nick Saban lay praise at multiple running backs, but a true freshman already turning heads in a year where we've talked about true freshmen on the defense turning heads, this is the exact recruiting class Alabama needed. I have said for so long that class of 2023 was the class to watch if you were an Alabama fan. Bama did great recruiting in 2022. We talked about it. My channel was really kicking off at that time. I was getting started. We talked time and time again about it. And even then, I kept pointing to the class of 2023 because I thought there were so many potential difference makers. Caleb Downs is there. Justice Haynes is there. James Smith is there. And Richard Young hasn't even stepped on campus. And there are still so many names we could be laying praise at. That's how good this freshman class is. Now, that being said, that's spring. There's a long ways to go. There's a lot of development to go, and none of these guys are complete projects. We're talking about their ability to get there, and right now it looks like they're on track. But I did want to put that little caveat because sometimes people will say, oh, but it's just spring. There's still a lot of time. We need to temper our excitement, and I do agree with that. We do need to hold expectations in check, realize it is just spring, but we also need to realize these guys are very, very gifted football players, and there's a reason every institution in the nation wanted them. Another part of the offense we have got to talk about that I really loved hearing about was the offensive line. I have made no secret that I'm a fan of Coach Wolford. I have been excited to see what he's going to do with this offensive line, and especially once the pieces really started coming together. And one thing Nick Saban said that stood out to me was that the offensive line is almost the leaders right now, the tone setters. And personally, I love that. Football is won and lost in the trenches. And one thing, as talented as Alabama was last year, they didn't play with that same edge that I think some previous Alabama teams had played with. Hearing that makes me almost think that they're getting back to that edge. They're getting back to that ferocity that really you have to have if you're playing the game of football. This is a dangerous game. This is a violent game, and you have got to approach it as such. And hearing that the offensive line is the group really setting the tone, I think that's a great indication, especially with some of the dudes on this offensive line. There are some position battles going on this offensive line in a good way. I'm so excited for the offensive line. But what about a room I talked about so much? A room I defended at times last season. Now, not to say that they were perfect, but a room that I kept saying the production right now is not matching the talent in the room. And that's the wide receiver room. Because time and time again, I would talk about it after watching these games and say, hey, the production's not there. A lot of these guys are super young. But these freshmen that Alabama just got in for the wide receiver room, they are so gifted. Isaiah Bond, Shaz Preston, Kobe Prentice, Kendrick Law, all of those guys I thought had real bright futures. We fast forward to now as they're going into their sophomore seasons. We hear Nick Saban lay praise at the feet of Kendrick Law. We hear great things about Kobe Prentice, about Isaiah Bond, proving the point I was talking about. This Alabama wide receiver room may not have the experience, may not have that one name, but I just think they're waiting for someone to make their name. And I can't wait to see who it's going to be. Malik Benson is a new face that has been turning heads. He is going to be that guy. I don't think anybody disputes that. I'm interested in seeing who's going to be that second guy. Is it going to be Brooks really stepping up, taking that next step? Because he's shown flashes of how good he can be. It's just about the consistency now. What about Jermaine Burton? Or could it be any of those guys I just talked about? It's an exciting puzzle to try and solve. But speaking of a puzzle that I cannot wait to see solved is the tight end room, and this really gets me back to Tommy Rees. One thing we know about Tommy Rees when he was at Notre Dame, loved the usage of the running back, loved the usage of the tight end. And personally, Alabama has a tight end on this roster that I have been excited for quite some time, and his name is Amari Niblack. I think he's an utter mismatch. And really, if you've been around the channel for any extended period at all, you know how highly I value the tight end position in football. I think it's one of the most important positions in the game right now. When you look around the landscape of college football, when you look in the NFL, they're using their tight ends as utter mismatches. Defenses, they're too big to just put a corner on them. They're too fast to put a linebacker on them. You're putting defenses in such bad positions. And I think Amari Niblack is a guy that if Alabama starts rolling out some 12 personnel, he and C.J. DePere, he and Danny Lewis, I think they're going to give defense fits, because now a defense has to sit there and say, okay, there's two very gifted tight ends on the field, and we know that guy over there, 84, Amari Niblack, he's got receiver traits in a tight end body. I cannot wait to see what this Alabama offense looks like, and we haven't even begun to talk about the quarterbacks, and we're going to lightly do so before we really kind of end this on the defensive side. We're not going to spend too much time over there. We did so the other day, and my voice is coming and going. So we're going to get out of here before it officially goes for today. But the quarterback battle continues to blaze on, and I think this is a good thing. Look, Jalen Milroe, every time we hear Nick Saban talk, every time we hear any tidbits after these scrimmages, everybody says he continues to just turn heads. How much he's progressed, how much he's learned. People are excited, but so too are they excited about former five-star Ty Simpson. And look, the hard part about this, and I know this is a little bit of a cop-out answer, whenever I went back and really started watching Tommy Rees, I thought that would give me a clear indication as to who the quarterback would be for Alabama. I thought going back and watching Tommy Rees at Notre Dame would give me some sort of clairvoyance to understanding how this quarterback battle could shake up. And in fact, the opposite happened. I left the Notre Dame film study a bit more confused than I went in, because I was genuinely sitting there like, both of these guys fit into the offense he wants to run. Both of these guys can do it, because I think we kind of forget how mobile Ty Simpson is. Now, in no way, shape, or form am I comparing him to Jalen Milroe and his mobility. We know Milroe is special in that aspect. But Ty Simpson's got some get up and go now. Do not discount it. I think when I look at Ty Simpson, the phrase I would use, he's got escapability. He has got great escapability, and he's got some mobility, but the word I would use is escapability. If something happens in the pocket, he can get out, buy time, keep his eyes downfield, and make a throw. Something Alabama fans came accustomed to with Bryce Young. And in no way, shape, or form am I saying Jalen Milroe can't do that. It's just that Nick Saban made it a point to talk about Ty Simpson's mobility, and personally, I found that compelling because the Tommy Rees quarterbacks had a bit of that mobility to them, which is exactly why I left that film study with less clairvoyance than I went into it with. But let's transition to the defensive side of the football, because there is one thing I really want to talk about. Apparently, Kool-Aid McKinstry came back for this scrimmage. Some guys still out. Some rotation at the linebacker position. Super interested in what the spring game shows us there. Some names really looking forward to: Sean Murphy, Tresman Marshall, Jahad Campbell, someone who I've been very excited about. But I really wanted to hone in on the secondary, because there's two names that Nick Saban talked about that stood out to me. First and foremost, Christian Story. Secondly, Caleb Downs. Caleb Downs continues to impress. I said the moment he committed, and if I'm not mistaken, I had a video whenever we were breaking down his top schools, and I was saying whoever gets this kid is going to be extremely lucky. I thought he was at the very worst, a top 5 player in the nation. And from the sounds of it, that's continuing in these practices, so something we have got to watch. But what about Christian Story? Nick Saban said something that I found very interesting. He talked about Christian Story, said he has so much ability, but now it's about doing it consistently. He needs to play like a starter consistently. And to me, and if I'm reading too much into this, by all means, guys, y'all know I like for all of you to keep me accountable. I think it makes this fun. I think it makes it interactive. If you disagree, by all means, hop down in the comments. We can talk about it. But when I heard Nick Saban say we want him to play like a starter, to me, it sounds like whenever Christian Story is putting it together, they want nothing more than to put him back in that secondary opposite of who I believe will be Caleb Downs, because of his ball hawking ability. However, Malachi Moore just has so much experience in college football right now and is probably able to do things much more consistently. Now, the good news with Malachi Moore is he brings versatility to the table. If it is indeed Christian Story you want to put back there at that safety position, you can move Malachi Moore around. But I also think Christian Story has a bit of that versatility as well, to where in dime packages you could insert him in and have a really exciting secondary. But I can't wait to hear from all of you. Hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.